Welcome, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Lynn Berger, host of Lynn Berger Interviews Remarkable People. And today I have the privilege of speaking with Joanna Cawley, a nonprofit executive and community leader. She is currently the executive director of Carnegie Hill Neighbors. Joanna, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure. So there's a lot to get to with your career and the transitions you made, but let's start from the beginning. Did you know what you wanted to do when you were younger?
Yeah, as a child, I was always interested in art. I was always drawing something or playing in the basement with my dad with balsa wood sculptures, and I always had my hand in some sort of artistic pursuit. The school that I went to was very academic, and so what I would do is after school and on the weekends I attended the Art Students League, where I really got into life drawing. I became fascinated with Vesalius and anatomy, and so ultimately, and for my college career, I pursued a degree in painting, a fine arts degree in painting with a minor in ceramics and printmaking. So for me, it's always been about working with my hands and creating beautiful things.
So take us back to your education. Where did you study art?
Sure. So after high school, I went to Bard College, and I was accepted in their early decision program for my painting portfolio. And when I got there and started working in the studios, I was very self-conscious about, am I good enough? And I was constantly comparing myself to other students. And so I ultimately switched my major to art history, which was a mistake because after a year and a half, I had my first major transition where I went through a crisis and I thought, oh, I can't do this. I really want to study art, fine art. And so I took a leave of absence and came back to New York City and worked on my portfolio some more back at the Art Students League with a wonderful instructor named Frank O'Kane, who was of the Hans Hofmann School. So I really developed my understanding of color theory with him, and ultimately ended up at Pratt Institute, where I continued on my original plan of painting, and then I had a minor in ceramics and printmaking, which would prove to be very significant in my life later on, which I didn't know at the time.
Well, thank you so much for sharing about that transition and when you went to art history and then you came back to what was true to yourself. That was a bold move.
Yes, I have self-reflection, would be a good way to put it, and on other days I might call it self-doubt. So that is something that that I struggle with, but ultimately it seems as though I make the right decisions, but I'm a slow learner. I take my time and then it seems to work out.
I would call it deliberate.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
That's very good versus to do something a little bit too quickly.
Yeah. I spent most of my time in the painting studio, but funny, when I was going through the thesis process, I had to write a series of papers and present a body of work, and it was really stressful for me. It was the early 90s, so the forum was very confronting, and you had to present in front of a group of peers and professors, and so I found myself through the middle. I thought, this is a lot. I need to figure out how to decompress. So I started going into the pottery studio just to kind of hack around and teach myself some, ceramics basics on the wheel. And I ended up passing my thesis. I was very, went very well. But during that time, I developed, a real meditative practice with the pottery. And what I also loved about pottery was the concept of, so another thing that I had always kind of doubted or deliberated about in pursuing a fine art degree was, what is it really for? My growing up, my mother was very, about doing things yourself and being self-sufficient. And I thought, well, painting, it's two-dimensional. It's on a wall. You can't eat out of it. You can't store things in it. It doesn't keep you warm. What is it really for? Is it frivolous? And so when I started working in the pottery studio, I realized that I could express myself artistically through the form and through the glazes and have some of those same narratives or themes through the work with pottery, but there was also that functional element to it. And that really just made me feel more qualified to do what I was doing. I found it was a lot easier to get jobs and work, paying work in the crafts rather than in fine arts. And so ceramics, it fed me in two ways. I could have my cereal out of it and I got a paycheck.
Literally and figuratively.
So.
And you had things to look at.
That's
that you
right.
could touch and feel.
Yeah.
So what was your graduate school experience like?
Yeah, so let's see. I graduated Pratt in 1995, and in the interim years, I worked in several art studios. I taught ceramics all over the city at the 92nd Street Y, at the 14th Street Y. I worked at Greenwich House Pottery, and I found that pottery was fascinating, but there was a whole world of other craft arts. And so I also worked at Urban Glass as a tech. I worked at a paper mill. I really wanted to understand materials and techniques. I'm fascinated by the process of these things. And so before I enrolled in a real graduate school, I actually got myself a kind of another body of education just by working in all of these studios.
I'm sure.
And so after doing that for several years, I guess it was about 2000, I found, patchworking, a life that could be financially viable to be able to support myself. It was really difficult working in art studios. And in my formative education in high school, I went to a very academically driven school, and that was something that I hadn't developed through the art, through the fine arts. So I thought, well, why don't I apply to graduate school for an academic degree centered in the arts, focused on the arts, and then, I can kind of do a dual track where I can make things, but then possibly publish or get a job, working in that way. And so I looked at the schools in New York City. I wanted to stay in New York. I'm a city kid. And I ended up at the Cooper Hewitt Parsons graduate program for decorative arts and material culture.
And then you graduated.
And then I graduated. And what did I do in those ensuing years? I was married at that point, and I had my son, Liam, who's now 20. He was 6 months old when I graduated. And what did I do? So I finished that degree, and I went back to pottery. I kind of looked around, thinking maybe I would work in a gallery. I worked at the Winter Antique Show on the vetting committee for a couple of years. I worked for a gallery creating catalog entries for a collection of pottery again. So I did dabble a little bit in the academic end, but ultimately I really just wanted to get my hands back in the mud, get
literally
get into that again. And so with a little with a little child, I realized the limitations of working in a pottery studio were going to be great, because pottery is not just immediate. You know, you make the work, you have to have several days to let it dry, then you have to glaze, you have to fire, and firing a kiln, you need to be there to babysit it, and I couldn't be away from my little baby for so long, so my husband and I decided to look for a place to live where we could have a studio in the house.
Oh, how nice.
So that's what we did. We found a building in Midtown, and I opened 31st Street Studio. And that was where I began to work on commission. I stocked the studio with porcelain clay. So it was, people loved that, you know, beautiful white clay for porcelain dinnerware.
Sounds nice.
Yeah, and then to supplement the times when I wasn't working on a commission, I started teaching classes, and I ended up teaching everyone from 5-year-olds hand building up to 85-year-olds. You know, I had a multi-generational.
How interesting. Together or separately?
No, separately. Little kids would come after school, and I'd teach moms, you know, who in the mornings they would drop their kids off and then come to the studio to kind of, you know, hang out, have fellowship, and make, you know, little things. And then I would do workshops at night, which was a lot of fun. I got to work with a lot of artists and designers and architects who, instead of taking clients out to big dinners, you know, they would come to the studio and we would have wine and cheese, and they would
That sounds terrific.
make things. And that was really lovely, just for that little bone that, you know, that I didn't get to pick as much as I wanted, that academic piece to what I like to do. So it was a lot of fun, and I did that for many years.
How many years did you do that?
We had the studio from 2006 to 2016. I spent 10 years, 5-6 days a week in the studio, throwing lots of pots, lots of repetitive motion. When I would work on a commission, if I had a set of 6, like a dinnerware set for 6 place settings, you know, you have to throw a lot of things to get them to all match. And so all of that repetitive work started hurting my hands. And I thought, this is weird. And one day I was having a coffee before I got to work, and I bent my fingers, and then 2 of them wouldn't come back up. And I thought, well, that's odd.
Scary.
So I spoke to, I called the orthopedist who had, you know, helped my son at that point, who had broken his arm 3 times, you know, once on a bike, once skiing, and once a compound fracture falling off a horse.
You can count on a child.
Yeah, so, you know, we went in for the family plan at NYU, the orthopedics division, and he said, yeah, Joanna, you've got a problem. All the tendons the ligaments and the tendons in your hand have been destroyed. And if you don't stop what you're doing, you're going to lose the use of your hand. So it ended up that I had to have 3 surgeries on my left hand, which was a real drag. When he went in, he said it looked like a plate of pasta that somebody had cut up, you know, spaghetti that somebody had sliced up for their kid for dinner. So that was a real blow to me.
I'm sure.
Yeah, because I defined myself as a person who, you know, made things to provide for, you know, for my family. I was providing sustenance, you know, for my family, having them eat off of the plates that I made, and you know, the whole process, the alchemy of pottery is just so alluring and something that I really fell in love with. And so I really didn't know what I was going to do with myself, and I didn't know who to talk to or turn to, so I went to church. The church that I grew up going to on the Upper East Side, called Heavenly Rest. It's a beautiful beautiful place. And I spoke to the priest and I said, Matt, I don't really know what I'm going to do here now. I've been out of the work world. I've never had kind of a real job, in an office. I'm someone who works with their hands, and now I'm not supposed to do that anymore. What am I supposed to do?
That must have been very challenging.
Yeah, it was odd, and I also was very aware that I did not want to be a mom that wasn't doing something other than just mothering.
You knew yourself.
Yeah, I needed to, be able to model a good behavior for my daughter, who I had a daughter at that point too, and for my son to know that women can work and take care of the home and all the rest. So Matt said, Joanna, I have got a great opportunity for you. And I thought, oh, okay, let's hear this. And he said, well, Carnegie Hill, which is where the church is, there's a CBO, the local nonprofit, Carnegie Hill Neighbors, that would like to make a change, and they're looking for a new executive director. Would you be interested? And I thought, what?
You never saw yourself like that.
That came out of complete, total left field. I grew up in Carnegie Hill and had a bit of a diverse skill set from most of my peers. Most of my peers who I went to school with went on to finance or law or medicine, professional degrees. And, I went to Brooklyn to do art. So I thought, I don't know how I'm going to fit in here. And he said, well, no, you're perfect for this because you know the neighborhood inside and out. And, as you've been doing your pottery, you've done a lot of fundraising for the church. He said, I know you told me about how you ran the annual fund for your kids' schools. And he said, you like talking, and a lot of this is just talking and meeting people. And he said, I think you'd be great. And he said, well, you just trust me and meet them. And I said, okay. So I did. And Carnegie Hill Neighbors is a 50-year-old nonprofit organization with a volunteer board and an executive committee. At that time, I think there were 6 on the committee, and I met with all of them in stages for several interviews, and we spoke, and I was very interested to hear about how the organization wanted to grow and kind of have a 2.0 of what they had been doing, very successfully, mind you, for
many years
at that point. They just come over the 40-year hump, but they wanted to kind of elevate, their programming and re-identify with the neighborhood, with the changing demographic. Founded in 1970 by a group of small volunteers. Most of them, had grown older, and they needed to bring in that new population, and so they wanted to
fresh blood
to do that with me. So I did. I joined.
How did you go about
2016.
making that decision? Was it a hard one to say yes to?
It was fear producing because, for one thing, I didn't spend a lot of time on computers, Excel, like all of the the day to day. I thought, I'm not going to be able to figure out how to do this. Also, how I had identified or kind of individuated away from my childhood surroundings, my beginnings. But there was also something really attractive for me about it because I had an absolutely amazing childhood growing up in the neighborhood. It really is like a little hamlet in the big city. And Carnegie Hill is one of the few neighborhoods that have true small businesses. When I was in the interview process, I actually went back to the neighborhood to walk around and visit my old haunts, the stores that I used to go to. And I think one of the turning points for me where I thought, I do belong here, I can do this, was when I walked into Feldman's Housewares. Scott, who runs Feldman's now, I walked in and he kind of looked at me, and I literally hadn't been in there in probably 25 years. And I was going up to pay, and I had my credit card, and he said, "Joanna Greiner?" And I said, "Yeah, now Cawley." But yeah, I said, I said, when I was a kid, my parents had a charge account here. And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, Jane and Norman," and rattled off my childhood address. And that blew me away. I thought, wow, that is incredible. And then I went to the 90th Street Pharmacy, and Vincent, who was, a teenager when I was a kid there, he remembered my family, and for me it was poignant because my parents passed away early in life, and so they weren't around, and it felt like I was coming home. Yeah, and so I did, and started at Carnegie Hill Neighbors in 2016, July. And it was my first time managing a staff and all the various programs that they do. So it really was a baptism by fire. I remember I was thinking about coming here to talk to you today, and I thought, I wonder if I should tell Lynn what I really felt like every morning for the first year or so.
Please.
I would wake up in the morning filled with fear. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Am I going to burn this place down? I'm not going to know, how to negotiate this contract or deal with the patrol, or, I'm going to miss the, whatever other program that we need to do. And so I would get to work early and try to get there before everybody else, and bring my lunch, just kept powering through. And by the end of the day, everything was still intact.
Nothing blew up.
Nothing blew up. And slowly but surely, we started to add more community partnerships. We identified new ways for the neighborhood to kind of make meaning of the benchmark programs, but enrich them. And so it was really gratifying, and I really loved it. And where I wasn't, throwing pots and doing that, I was in a very process-laden kind of
absolutely
environment. It's all about incremental building of my personal skill set, the Excel and all that kind of thing, but also that incremental relationship building, and creating just more and bigger and better off these little beginnings and kernels of ideas. And I recognized that, one of the things that I love about being in the arts, and specifically craft arts, is that process aspect of it. It's never about the result, it's about the process.
Well, because of your background, you could see that. And I really appreciate you sharing that. You were scared. You felt fear, and you powered through it. And look what happened. Now you're a very successful organization.
Yeah, we're doing well. We weathered COVID. We shrunk our staff. We managed to hold on to our space. We took advantage of all of the wonderful grants that federal and city afforded. We got 2 PPP loans. We did the EIDL loan, and we moved completely to Zoom, which was bizarre as a community organization. But it worked out well. We partnered with the city on a lot of things. We started doing lots of giveaways for protective equipment.
Nice.
Yeah, in the wake of COVID, we identified that many of our populations felt isolated. Carnegie Hill is a neighborhood with very young and very old constituents, and so we started to find out how we could reintegrate our more mature population.
It's a very vibrant organization, and if you could just, because we're getting down to the last minute or two here, tell us, in one sentence the mission of the organization and how people can really get in touch and learn more.
Sure. So Carnegie Hill Neighbors' mission is to provide quality of life programming for the neighborhood. The three pillars are beautification, safety, and preservation. And what that means is safety in the sense that we have a neighborhood patrol that is participation based. We have a beautification program where we plant and maintain the malls on Park Avenue. We have a street tree care committee where we try to get as many trees on the sidewalks as possible. And then preservation is our mission to maintain the historic integrity, the architectural integrity, and the historic context of the neighborhood. Carnegie Hill has many incredibly important
It's beautiful.
architectural examples.
Yes, yes. And if you could tell people how to find out more and the contact information or the website.
Sure. Yeah, so we can be found on Instagram, Facebook, and online. Our website is chneighbors.org. That's CHNEIGHBORS.org. We, aside from our mission, as I said, we have several community partnerships, and we have work training programs. We accept interns, we accept volunteers for everything from garden cleanups to becoming a citizen certified tree pruner for the city of New York. I am one. I got my certification.
Well, there's a lot to learn about
Yeah.
and do and participate. And I want to thank you so much. This was so interesting. It was wonderful to speak with you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be included in this wonderful program.
I couldn't think of a better person. Thank you.
Wonderful.